Welcome to another episode of All Things Mac. I'm your host, Jim Fair. Today I'd like to update my video on setting up your Mac to avoid certain problems that involve a lot of Apple services. So there's a couple of things that can be problematic, especially for students. So number one would be FileVault, so full disk encryption. Great technology if you need to cross international borders with top secret proprietary information on your laptop, but the average person doesn't need that, and more often than not, having that turned on makes your disk more susceptible to problems, and then when problems occur, they are much harder to rectify. Another issue is with iCloud. Apple loves this iCloud service, and by default, anyone who creates an account gets 5 gigabytes of free storage, which on the surface is very generous. However, if you just accept all of Apple's recommendations in setting up your Mac, you'll find you are going to run out of iCloud space almost instantly, because as soon as you create any pictures or movies, you're going to hit that 5 gig limit, and then you're constantly getting a message, iCloud is full, iCloud is full, iCloud is full, cancel, 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 and nobody wants to pay them. So if you're not going to pay them, don't turn it on. I mean, you can turn it on, but just turn off the thing where it says, I'm going to mirror your desktop and your documents and all your photos. So we'll show you how to avoid these pitfalls in setup. So here we have a MacBook Pro. This one happens to be a 2015 because mine's in the shop right now. And here's the initial setup screen for Mojave. It knows we live in Canada, so we're going to just say Canada, and sometimes we'd have to scroll through the alphabetical list of countries to find our country and click on it. Okay, so next we have keyboard layout. Now if you say US, it's probably not going to make any difference in terms of Canada, but what it's going to do is put your region as the US, and then you get your dates all messed up, like Americans have their dates backwards in my opinion. Anyway, so I recommend you select Canadian English for your keyboard and click continue. Then you have this lovely screen where Apple talks to you about your data and your privacy, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Apple. And finally, we get to this transfer information screen. So if you have a Time Machine backup or an older Mac or even a Windows PC you want to transfer information from, here's where you would call upon this technology called the Migration Assistant, which is a fairly buggy program from Apple to transfer data. In my case, I'm going to say, no, I do not want to transfer any information. Okay, so here's the big problem right here. Sign in with your Apple ID. So if you do this, it's going to turn on all of these services: iCloud, iTunes, the App Store, Messages, Find My Mac. Now, some of these services may actually be very useful, but I recommend you click Setup later. If, on the other hand, you want to set this up, let's just walk through how to set it up without turning on the worst things. So I'm going to put in my Apple ID, which, you probably don't care, and my password for sane, and we'll see what happens. So now Apple knows my real name, and it knows it's me, and on all my Apple devices I'm going to get a security notification saying, Dear Jim, we noticed you enabled your Apple ID on a new device. Okay, so we're going to read the agreement and agree, and so here we have create a computer account, and see it knows I'm James Fair. But I just want to create an account that's just called admin. I'm going to choose a simple password like Apple, because I'm going to have to type it about 20 times as I install software. Allow my Apple ID to reset this password? Well, no, I don't really want to do that. You can, if you forget your password, use your Apple ID to reset it. But more often than not, people forget their Apple ID password, and then that becomes a huge problem. And when you set up your Apple ID, you've got to set up 3 security questions, and people often forget those. And it can be very, very frustrating for Apple to reset these things for you if you forget all of that. So don't turn any of this stuff on. If you're not good at remembering passwords, or you're not going to write them down, put them in a database somewhere, a spreadsheet, a password management system like 1Password. That's the one I'm using now. I used to use LastPass. It's not bad as well. But they had a couple of outages, and I decided to try 1Password. Anyway, so we're going to create a computer account unrelated to our Apple ID, even though Apple now knows our Apple ID and password. We're going to click Continue. And, we could have just left it, and created our account, but then every time you visit a web page, the logs, are going to have things in them that might identify you. So here now it's going off to iCloud and setting up the account. And then it might offer us some options here. So again, we want to make sure we do not turn on the mirroring of desktop and documents to the cloud. So, and I don't want an iCloud Keychain. So this is a service that Apple runs to save your passwords. I'm not going to set that up. I'm going to click Continue. I mean, if you don't have a password management system, you can use Apple's. But of course, it's only going to work on Apple devices. And here we have the Express Setup page that only appears in Mojave and I guess Catalina when it comes out. But I always click Customize here because the first thing that comes up is Location Services, and I do not really want Location Services to be on. Now, you do need it to be on if you're going to use Find My Mac, and you're going to try and track your Mac if it gets stolen. So you can ignore my advice if that's an important feature for you, but you can always turn it on later. So I'm going to say Continue and Don't Use. And of course now it doesn't know where I am, so it's going to want to know our time zone, and by default it's Cupertino, California, where Apple is headquartered. And we can just click on the map, or we could start typing in the name of the nearest city. So I live near Toronto, and that's all the Apple needs to know about me. I'm going to click Continue. Analytics. It wants to share information with developers and with Apple. I turn all of it off when I do the setup, and I can turn it on later when my first crash happens. Right? You can always turn this stuff on later. Doesn't hurt to leave it off. Same thing with Siri. Siri, the intelligence of Siri is on Apple's servers on the network, on the internet. So in order for Siri to work, it's constantly listening for the phrase, "Hey Siri," so it's kind of listening to everything you say. And you see, there's my phone. "Hey Siri." I'm not sure I understand. Yeah, go away, Siri. Be quiet. My phone heard me say, "Hey Siri." Shh, don't say it again. Anyway, we don't want Siri to turn itself on. You can always turn it on if you want later, right? So we're going to say Continue. Okay, here it is. All your files in iCloud. No, heavens to Betsy, no, we do not want to do this. As nice as it might be if you have really fast internet everywhere and really fast Wi-Fi, most people can't claim that is the case. So you really do not want to have your documents and desktop automatically upload to iCloud Drive. And the way they've implemented this is so crazy. So if you have this on and then you later want to go and turn it off, it tells you, "I'm going to delete everything off your Mac and it'll be in iCloud for you to get." And you can go to iCloud.com to download your stuff. It's like, what? You're going to delete all my stuff and I have to download it? What kind of an idiotic option is that? So people are afraid of that, so they leave it on, and then they're constantly getting the iCloud, your storage is full, you need to pay us for more storage message. And it's like, oh, please deliver me from Apple. So, you know, iCloud can be a nice service, but for most people, just use it for preferences and things. Don't turn on storage for desktop and documents, and definitely not for photos. All right, oh, and here's another one. Turn on FileVault. Allow iCloud to unlock my disk. No, none of this should be on. So unless you happen to be running a criminal organization and you need encryption, then by all means, if you're a criminal, turn on your encryption. But for normal people, you know, I shouldn't even say that in jest. For normal people, you do not need that kind of security, and it's just going to make your computer harder to fix, harder to troubleshoot, easier to crash, easier to lose data, right? So if I have turn on FileVault, it's going to give me some options like, should I save your encryption key in iCloud? And I could say yes, but again, that is my encryption key for this disk, which is a very important piece of information. If I save that in iCloud, then anyone who could access my iCloud account could conceivably get my encryption key and access all my data if they had physical access to this piece of hardware. Not that that's a really big deal. You could also say, don't put it in iCloud, just give me the key now and I'll take a picture of it, or I'll write it down, or I'll copy and paste it into a document, whatever. Again, it's not something you need to turn on for normal use. You know, if you're traveling out of the country and you're afraid if your laptop were stolen that somebody could steal your identity, sure, turn FileVault on, but otherwise leave it off, okay? Okay, and since we're in Mojave, we have a choice of dark mode or light mode. Now, I kind of like dark mode, but lately, whenever I hit this screen, I'm picking light mode because it's cheerier somehow. So I'm just going to stick with light mode. And that's basically it for the initial setup app. So setup is now complete. It's going to dump me into the Finder. Here we have the Finder and our normal desktop for Mojave. So that's the end of part 1. Please switch over to part 2 if you want to see my recommendations for setting up your Mac after the initial setup. Thanks for watching.